6 months ago, on January 17th, a date that will long be remembered as one of great disappointment in our recent Virgin Islands history, I received a call from Mr. John Hess, the chairman of the board and the CEO of Hess Corporation. Mr. Hess was calling to inform me that the next morning, HOVENSA, the joint venture of Hess and PDVSA, the national oil company of Venezuela, will be issuing a press statement announcing the closure of the oil refinery on St. Croix, which included the dismissal of all of its employees and the termination of the contracts with all its independent suppliers and contractors, thus costing over 2,000 residents to lose their jobs on St. Croix. Mr. Hess was not calling to ask us to do anything or to ask me for our thoughts on this matter. He was simply calling to inform the government and the people of the Virgin Islands of a decision that had already been made, a done deal, with no input from us. A decision we now know was actually made in December of 2011. That we received less than 24 hours notice was a sure indicator of just how little the U.S. Virgin Islands has come to mean to Hess, as well as for its partner PDVSA, despite the fact that the Virgin Islands and its people have been partners with Hess for a better part of half a century. Hess's and later HOVENSA's entire existence in our territory has been in partnership with the government. Without government, both would not have the benefits that they've enjoyed and profited over these many decades, the Federal Jones Act, and our ability to negotiate tax agreements under our congressional grant of such authority is what made the refinery possible here. Each administration, dating back to Governor Paiwanski's work to bring the refinery to St. Croix, has worked with Hess and then with HOVENSA to assure the continued viability of the refinery. Indeed, that is why the controlling contract that lays out the obligations of all parties is commonly referred to as a third extension agreement. Each extension has been negotiated as a modification or change to prior versions of the agreement to meet changing realities, market conditions that all of the partners, the oil companies and the government alike, understood to be required. And accordingly, each extension was negotiated in good faith. Never before have the owners of HOVENSA acted unilaterally and shown such total disregard for our community. Never before have they made their demands after a unilateral action of closure and in a climate of threat such as the present situation. Simply stated, the government has long valued our partnership with HOVENSA and with Hess before it. We've nurtured this partnership and we've taken steps time and time again, even when popular will might have dictated otherwise, to work with the owners of the refinery to assure that the refinery remained competitive and viable. The relationship with the refinery was set out in the original agreement, which has been repeatedly modified and amended to permit the refinery to thrive while it also produced the benefits in tax revenues as well as employment that it has provided not just to St. Croix, but to the entire territory. But when the end came, it was because the two owners of HOVENSA, no doubt for their own separate reasons that we will not likely ever fully know, each decided that we no longer served their purposes. In the end, that is all it was, a corporate decision to unilaterally disregard a half-century of a partnership and a half-century of a community's willingness, proven time and time again, to do what was needed to be done to assure that our partnership continued. And they made their decision knowing full well that they were and remain bound by the terms of a legal contract between HOVENSA and the United States Virgin Islands through its government. That after so many years, and notwithstanding the existence of a contract, HOVENSA would think that the best way forward was to simply announce what it wished to do without considering the impact of its actions on the territory was regrettable. Perhaps the thinking was that they had us over to the not quite so proverbial barrel, and that we had no choice but to do what they said, to agree to what they demanded. But rest assured of one thing, and let me be very clear, my only interest is the protection of health, safety, and security of these islands and our people. My only concern is our future, not Hess's and not the Venezuelan National Oil Company's future. It is only when HOVENSA's interests and our interests coincide that their interests become our interest. It was only when they were, as they have long been, a contributing element of our society, that they deserved and received the considerable assistance and cooperation due to our largest employer, and quite often our largest taxpayer. But they made their decision and they took their actions, so I've taken action on behalf of the territory. Immediately upon learning of Hess's and PDVSA's decision, I convened a strategy group to evaluate our options. The closing of HOVENSA has had a range of devastating impacts on our community. It has caused the loss of 2,000 direct jobs. It threatens to devastate the St. Croix economy. It threatens the long-standing price discounts to WAPA in the form of subsidized fuel supplies presently valued at about $50 million a year, which have kept our electricity costs from rising even higher. And because HOVENSA operates the only docking facility, storage facility, and distribution facility, the so-called RAC, on St. Croix, their action has caused many to fear a threat to the availability of gasoline and other fuels on St. Croix. Additionally, the closure and loss of jobs means the loss of almost $100 million in tax revenues to our general fund at this time of great budget deficit. The list of additional indirect impacts, such as those on charities and private schools, and a host of businesses that indirectly supplies HOVENSA and its employees, not to mention our real estate values of homes on the island of St. Croix, goes on and on. And as we met to discuss our options, there were several tactical imperatives that we had to address first. These included taking no action that would give HOVENSA cause to withhold severance payments that were due in April, assuring a transition period with continued provision of oil and oil price subsidies to WAPA, identification of alternative providers of oil and gasoline to the territory as a whole, and assuring ourselves that the oil storage facilities at HOVENSA would be available under whatever circumstances might transpire, so that the energy lifeblood of our territory could not be choked off. Just a week after the HOVENSA closure announcement, HOVENSA put their proposal on the table, outlining what they wish to do with the refinery facility going forward. As we all know now, that proposal was to create an oil storage business to operate under a modification of the concession agreement that would reduce HOVENSA's obligation, while at the same time grant further tax benefits not only to them, but to the customers of their proposed storage facility. This business would continue oil shipments in and out of the HOVENSA port, leaving all the environmental risks that come from such activity, but without the benefits that would balance those risks. It would provide at most 100 jobs. It would require a reduction in their annual property tax payments as set forth in their contract with the government from $14 million to $4 million. They also sought a lengthy extension of the submerged land permit at a rent of $1 per year. And the entire package was initially presented to us as somehow non-negotiable, as somehow not requiring justification or factual support. To add injury to insult, HOVENSA then threatened our territory by stirring up fears across an already shaken community. Indeed, we were treated to the insult of having their CEO suggest at a public meeting of concerned residents of St. Croix that there should be no concerns about the continued availability of oil and gasoline on the island as long as the modifications to the concession agreement that HOVENSA proposed were approved promptly. So there it was. In just a few short months, our half-century-old partners had not only abandoned any sense of a partnership, they had not only shown no regard whatsoever for the impact of their corporate decisions on a community that had long supported them, but they had proven themselves willing to play on our fears and our anxieties to get their way by blatantly threatening further devastation if we did not kneel before their demands. To provide the government with the needed industry advice, and after an expedited request for proposal process, we retained the industry experts, Duff & Phelps. Duff & Phelps has done a comprehensive analysis of the situation, using all information at their disposal. It is also important to note that HOVENSA has not been supportive of their work, and wherever possible seemed to avoid providing information to us and to our advisors. And let none of us be fooled. They have no defense on the basis of confidential information, as the information requested was nothing more that any EDC applicant would be required to provide before their request for consideration of tax exemptions could even be considered. And do not misunderstand what HOVENSA is now asking us for. They are asking that an existing contract be modified to relieve them of the obligation they have under the existing contract, and that they be provided even more tax exemptions and reductions than they previously enjoyed. Duff & Phelps' conclusion was clear. The best outcome, the most logical outcome, and the highest and best use for the HOVENSA refinery site and facility was and is as an oil refinery. Their analysis pointed out some interesting facts about the refining industry and about HOVENSA's facility in particular. They noted the cyclical nature of the industry's profitability and that the industry appears to be recovering from a low point of profitability. They also noted that the Hess decision to exit the refining business was also a logical decision, both because of the losses they sustained in this last business cycle, but also because of the industry movement away from integrated companies whose operations span the range from exploration and drilling to refining to retail distribution and gas station ownership. Duff & Phelps suggested that the HOVENSA refinery has been handicapped by a couple of problems that can be fixed or remedied, and in one case that will be remedied by time without any action on their part. This latter issue is that there's a cost advantage favoring some Midwest refineries due to their particular access to lower cost West Texas Intermediate crude oil at a favorable price compared to other crude oil because of delivery contracts that are expiring in the near term. This will eliminate that advantage to those refineries and take away the disadvantage that has been HOVENSA's had it to compete against lower cost crude oil available to its competitors. And second, and a more significant problem pointed out by Duff & Phelps, is one that we all in the Virgin Islands understand. Simply stated, HOVENSA has a high cost structure that has put it at a competitive disadvantage. It burns oil, indeed its own refined products, to make the electricity that is needed to produce those products. In an oil refinery, electricity is the second highest cost after the cost of crude oil. This higher energy cost hurts HOVENSA when it must compete with others that get cheaper electricity either by buying from hydro sources or making it from lower cost coal or natural gas. In other words, HOVENSA has the same basic problem WAPA does. It uses an expensive fuel to make electricity which costs more than electricity might cost if generated by using a lower cost fuel. Effectively, if HOVENSA lowered its own LEAC, it would be more competitive regardless of the up and down cycles of the oil refining business. But one more overarchingly important factor must also be kept in mind. It is the conclusion of those in the industry and of Duff & Phelps that beyond the first two problems I've just noted, the problem of crude oil pricing that is correcting itself, and the problem of running the refinery on lower cost fuel, the HOVENSA refinery is a refinery that can be competitive and profitable for the right owner. Duff & Phelps has advised us as to a compelling path forward. What seems to be the present reality is that after a low point in profitability when many refineries closed, refinery sales are now taking place. The purchasers are national oil companies like PetroChina, which is purchasing the Aruba refinery, and energy firms like PBF Energy that has purchased the New Jersey and Delaware refineries that were shut or sold by their previous owners. Duff & Phelps has suggested to us that the owners of HOVENSA can and should sell the refinery, noting my belief that the government must be prepared to assist WAPA in finding a way to finance a conversion to lower cost fuel, such as liquefied natural gas, LNG. They suggest that this might well be accomplished quicker and cheaper if done in coordination with the investments needed to make the refinery more efficient. I know, and so will either HOVENSA or any new owner of the refinery, that never again will the owner of that refinery be in a position to threaten to hold the government and the people of this territory hostage by threatening to withhold fuel, whatever fuel it is using or providing, including natural gas. But if the infrastructure that would bring significant benefits to the refinery would, as it appears it could, also bring benefits to WAPA and to its ratepayers, then this government stands ready to participate fully and cooperatively with respect to all aspects of that conversion, including capital investments, the use of tax-exempt financing, and whatever other matters government participation can influence, including facilitating permits and intervening in federal regulatory proceedings. Duff & Phelps has advised us that there's little benefit to the territory from the proposed oil storage business. In their view, the oil storage business is little more than a holding action that benefits the owners of HOVENSA in several ways without any apparent balancing benefits to the territory. I've already spoken of the environmental risks that will continue without balancing benefits of jobs and revenues. But other factors outlined in the report are, first, that the storage operation allows HOVENSA to maintain the fiction that they might reopen the refinery without any commitment to actually do so, and therefore avoid triggering expensive closure obligations set forth in federal environmental protection laws. Second, it provides them with a free option to hold the refinery for a period of years during which sales conditions and prices might improve. And third, it allows them to shop to potential buyers the benefits of the renegotiated concession agreement they have demanded in ways that could further improve the price that they obtain for the refinery upon sale down the road, again, at the expense of the territory. In negotiating a delay in the date that HOVENSA originally declared when it would stop providing discounted fuel to WAPA, I agreed to consider the HOVENSA proposal and reply by this date. Before outlining both my decision and the compromise proposals I presented to HOVENSA, I do wish to make one thing very clear, and that is if they persist in this position that is not bound by the decades-old obligation to provide discounted fuel to WAPA, that discount will end at the end of our present agreement on December 31st. It is estimated by WAPA that that will result in an increase in electricity costs of between 20 to 25%. At no time has HOVENSA agreed to provide discounted fuel beyond the present year-end date, notwithstanding our view that HOVENSA has a contractual obligation to do so. But if HOVENSA disagrees, as it does, then the interpretation of that contract provision falls to the lengthy and expensive procedures of litigation. We have been advised on this process, as well as on the possibility and the risk of HOVENSA seeking to avoid their contract by putting the company in bankruptcy. The outcome of any litigation is always somewhat speculative, but all should be reassured that the government is, in the opinion of our counsel, the largest creditor of the entity, that our claims, if satisfied by litigation, including bankruptcy, might well be postponed, but they will be satisfied. But I do not want to dwell on what I trust will be avoided by all parties. What I do want to be forthright about is that given HOVENSA's present positions, the approximately $50 million of relief that we have felt in the LEAC, and the cost of electricity will be one more burden shifted onto the residents of the territory by reason of the abrupt corporate decision of HOVENSA to close the refinery. And as things now stand, that consequence may well be placed upon all of us as soon as the first of next year. Let me be clear. What will not be permitted to happen, however, is the shut-off of fuel oil, be it to WAPA or to St. Croix for motor fuel by any attempt of HOVENSA to deny access to either the docking facilities, which incidentally occupy territorial trust lands, or necessary storage or distribution facilities. I hope that the implicit threat contained in the regrettable remarks of their local executive will not be translated into any action that will be permitted to stand threatening public health and safety. So as to this, I do hope to assure all who live here that our attorneys have assured me that no HOVENSA action can directly lead to shutting off fuel supply and survive what would be an instantaneous court action. But I do not feel we need to be framing these issues in such adversarial terms. This is clearly reflected in the reply I gave HOVENSA this date. I trust it is clear by now that we have done our work during these past several months. And it must also be clear that I will not be recommending to the Senate that we accept the offer HOVENSA presented to us. Instead, I have presented to the owners of HOVENSA what is a choice of compromise proposals for it to consider, all of which are designed to lead to the reopening of a more efficient and profitable oil refinery on St. Croix. Boiled down to the essentials, our proposals are simple and straightforward. We ask Hess and PDVSA to make plans with us for the reopening of a more efficient refinery, jointly working to get the benefits of lower cost fuel supply for the refinery that can also be lower price fuel supply for WAPA. If they did not agree to do so, we ask them to proceed with us to find new owners who will work with us to achieve the results we seek. And operating an efficient oil refinery on St. Croix, providing jobs and revenues, using a fuel that will allow us to produce more affordable electricity for our residents. And if HOVENSA chooses not to accept either of the compromise proposals I've offered them, then I expect them to fully and completely comply with all the requirements of the contract that is in place between the government and the company. HOVENSA's failure to do so will require least efficient and the least desired outcome of all, an action to enforce the terms of the contract. I hope that it will not come to this. I believe the resolution of the present impasse is one that can be satisfactory to all parties. I believe the partners of HOVENSA have choices to make that are theirs alone to make as to what kind of an oil company each of the partners wishes to both be here and throughout the world. But as to this refinery, its highest and best use is to be open and operating and providing the substantial benefits that it has long provided to this territory. That is what the contract requires for at least the next decade. However, as all can now see, these issues are complex and interrelated. The future of our islands is vitally impacted by what happens on the HOVENSA site on St. Croix. Over the coming weeks, I will be meeting with the senators and many of you, and many local organizations and groups to explain what we are facing and what we are doing. By now you know, and HOVENSA knows, that the position of this government is that the company cannot simply walk away from the obligations set forth in our contract. But I commit to you, the people of the Virgin Islands, that I will work with these owners or future owners of the refinery to build a joint future that benefits us all. I know that they know that my only interest is and must be the long-term interest of the territory. But I believe we can find and that we will achieve that best interest for us all. Let us do this together. God bless the Virgin Islands, and God bless each of you.